Hello everybody, my name is Freaksy and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're talking about the first 24 hours of Pokémon Champions and my thoughts so far after getting about a good 6 hours of playtime in yesterday. I wanted to experience as much as I possibly could so I could give you my honest first impressions. And I thought the best way to do this was to go through everything in order, starting with the intro and tutorial. First off, I really liked the intro cutscene, the graphics were impressive, and when you first boot up the game, it definitely gives off this is the big next step for competitive Pokemon feeling. Once I got into my gym, though I did think some of the character animations looked a bit jerky and low res at times, but honestly, this is a game first and foremost about battling and not a cutscene simulator, so it wasn't something that necessarily bothered me as much, but I thought I would note this as I noticed that a lot of people online were complaining about janky first cutscenes and things like this, but as a game that isn't meant to be around story and this sort of thing, so I don't think it's a massive deal that opening cutscene isn't as perfect as everybody might have expected. The tutorial was exactly what I expected. For someone like me who's been playing Pokemon for over 10 years now, it was really not made for me, but I can totally see why it would be useful for people who are just coming into the VGC for the first time. It does a good job of making the basics feel accessible without overwhelming new players. When I picked my first Pokemon permanent recruit, I went for Tyranitar. That was an easy choice for me, because Tyranitar is always a monster in older metas, and with Mega Evolution in the game, it felt like a safe and strong pick for me personally. After that, the game gave me a team to use around Tyranitar, and this was one of the biggest surprises for me. I honestly wasn't expecting the game to give me such a solid team right away. Everything felt really well balanced. The Pokemon had good EV spreads, decent movesets, and everything felt like it was properly warming up for people who have not built a competitive Pokemon team before. For example, my Aggron even had Stealth Rocks, which really made me smile as it shows they weren't just throwing random Pokemon at you, it actually felt like a team built to teach you how to play properly. I can't comment on the teams for the other permanent starters you got, but for me, the one I got for Tyranitar I thought was really well balanced, and I thought really taught players, if they hadn't built a team before, what sort of aspects, and it's not all just about having moves that hit and do powerful damage. You need things like Stealth Rocks, Tailwind, these sort of things to also make sure your team is well balanced and well hitting the meta. As we get stronger metas with more powerful Pokemon in, I'm not sure how much these start teams are going to hold up. But in the beginner's ranks, it's still really great to be given a team off the bat that you can use to go in and have a bit of fun, even if you've never built a competitive Pokemon before. Now, so after I received my first competitive team, the game throws you into the main UI. This I really like. It reminds me a lot of Pokemon Unite with the tile-like layout, but it feels really smooth to move around. The menus did not lag at all, which is a really nice surprise. I cannot speak for the Switch 1 version, but on the Switch 2, I had no issues so far. Everything seems really cleanly laid out, and that always helps when you're playing a game around competitive battling. So after getting through all the tutorial phases, which I think it was really good that you could just skip anyway, and then coming into the main UI, the first thing that I did was jump into some online battles with the team that they'd given me. I actually think it's a really smart idea that the first few ranked games are limited to pre-given teams, because it stops your first battle from being against someone with a fully meta-trained team on day one. I managed to rank up with my initial team, which felt really great, of course. I do think in a few weeks everybody will have found the meta ground and it will not be as easy to do so, but for launch it was really nice to have to rush straight into home to immediately build out a full team. So the battles themselves felt really good. I really like the new battle animations, especially for the moves. I think they're all really clean, and the game runs well overall. I was really worried, obviously, after seeing some of the rougher cutscene animations, but once I got into the actual battles, it was far better than I expected. I was really glad to see this, and I'm really happy that the performance is really great on the Switch 2. I can't comment for the Switch 1, but hopefully the performance isn't too bad there. And again, the same for the mobile devices when it's released on that. Hopefully they can optimize the games so they can still be used very well on there as well. Then one other small change that I think is really great. I also really like how the game handles type matchups. I think it's really more effective, definitely, as when you can find out if a Pokemon is 4 times or 2 times effective against a move. I think that's really useful and a really great way for new players to learn and differentiate what Pokemon are weak to what types. As you know, for me, somebody who knows quite a lot about different Pokemon, it's easier, but not everybody has all this information stored up in their head. So I think it's really great and makes the game, again, really more accessible to a larger VGC audience. So overall, I've really enjoyed battling so far, and I think it's really great. But one thing I really hope they do change compared to old games is once an old regulation format has been rotated out, for example, in Scarlet and Violet, it would not be introduced back in anymore and you could not play that format again. I would love it if Pokemon Champions let you keep using different formats online, even after they are no longer available in the current ranked format, because it would give the game way more replayability. Pokémon Champions is also set up as the official battle platform for major competitive play, including Worlds 2026, and the game is designed around rotating regulations, so keeping old formats around would make that ecosystem even better. And it would also allow you to keeping those games and Pokemon that you want to keep in Champions itself, which would mean that you're going to want to buy expansion slots and keep more Pokemon in the game, meaning that hopefully the Pokemon company will make more money as you're going to buy expansions to store more Pokemon in if you're storing different teams, as you've got maybe one or two teams for each different format, for example. That being said, I do really like the rank system. It feels really similar to old VGCs, and if something isn't broke, you don't always necessarily have to fix it. I think once you hit Master Ball tier, I hope there is a really reliable way to hit like rank number 1 and be, the equivalent best in the world for online battles anyway. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they now they have this big hub, how they're actually going to handle ranking, and can they do anything to allow people to gain a number 1 rank and it have a bit more value than it did on other generations' competitive ladders. Furthermore, I really like the change to the Mega Evolutions. I think they're really interesting. I think having Mega Evolutions activated at the start of the rounds, allowing them to activate their new abilities, for example, Charizard, it's Fire Mega Evolution, the ability to activate Drought is really, really useful and I think a really cool effect. I also definitely can see them improving the presentation and graphics over time too. I also hope they add different battle backgrounds through events, because that would be a really cool way to make the game and battles feel more special. I definitely think people have the right to be worried about the small meta at the moment and the lack of items and things like this, but I think that if they've got a huge plan, and I really trust the Pokemon company, especially how great the 30th anniversary year has been so far. I really trust that they're going to be bringing out more metas, more games, more backgrounds, etc. All these sort of things to make the game keep feeling fresh and new. So now I've gone around my ideas around the battling and mechanics, I thought I would talk about the recruitment and training, another big point for me. Linking to Pokemon Home felt really easy, and then choosing Pokemon I wanted to bring into Champions was really straightforward, just going into the ranch and then literally clicking a button and it will bring the Pokemon in for you. The only gripe I have here is I really wish you could just do it all through Champions and in the game itself. However, I understand there's probably security concerns of just being able to access Pokemon Home directly into Champions. But if I didn't want to just access it, and because my issue was I had to close the app, go into Home and come back, I guess that I could just use the mobile app, add the Pokemon I wanted to bring into Champions, and then I wouldn't have to actually close Champions at all. Recruiting new Pokemon in-game is something that is very interesting to me. Though I do think it's something that you might want to avoid if you have games like Scarlet or Violet or Sword and Shield. The costs of recruiting Pokemon do add up quite quickly, especially when you consider you also need to buy Mega Stones and other items like berries, etc. That said, I can see why it's priced that way, because it also gives the newer trainers a way to get started without needing older file saves. But I can see, as we get into more and more Pokemon and more being released, the cost of recruiting Pokemon can steadily increase quite quickly, and there's nothing stopping them from increasing how much each Pokemon might cost to recruit. But overall, I think how easy it is to access and get Pokemon into Champions. It's through via Pokemon Home that it's not a major worry, as people who are playing these games, I would imagine, aren't their first time playing Pokemon, and they're already going to have Pokemon from somewhere, be it either from Pokemon Go or the main series games. Training seems solid too. If you really want to make small changes like swap one move, then the costs feel fair enough. But if you're constantly changing sets, I could see how VP could start disappearing faster than you want if you're not careful. I definitely would recommend, if you were going to go make a big change to your team or you had some big iterations you wanted to make, you would send the Pokemon back to home and do them in something like Sword or Scarlet, for example, as you're probably going to have a lot of resources built up there and you don't want to waste them in Champions when the game's new and we don't know how finite of a resource VP points are really going to be. Under the small section, I didn't touch much, but were the training tutorials. All the ones I've looked at so far seem to give a pretty generous amount of VP, and especially the Mega Evolution tutorial, it gives you lots of Mega Stones for free, which is great. Anything that lowers the barrier to entry for getting started is a big win in my books, especially when you're looking at each Mega Stone is about 2,000 VP when you can recruit a whole new Pokemon for 2,500. So to give you the option of, I think it's maybe at least 5 or 6 different Mega Stones to start with, you can really build quite a variety of different teams from the different Mega Stones you've been given. And honestly, I think one of the most significant changes for me is the removal of IVs, as the time sink is huge. For me, that was always one of the most annoying parts of getting a competitive team ready. So being able to find Pokemon, EV train it, give it the right moves, and just go into straight champions is a massive improvement. As you know, before you'd have to kind of come up with the team, and then you would have to breed the Pokemon to get the perfect IVs you really wanted, and then you could worry about EV training, and then you could worry about the moves, etc. Now, if you really want to try a Pokemon in your team, all you need to do is go and find that specific Pokemon, EV train it, which maybe takes around 15-20 minutes, if that, with the correct items in Scarlet and Violet, for example, and then just port that straight into Champions. So I think it's going to be fantastic in terms of, it would take ages for me personally, and it's kind of what, towards the end of Scarlet and Violet, put me off of playing the VGC, as I just didn't have the time to sink into building the Pokemon. I appreciated it and I enjoyed building the teams, but I didn't want to spend hours and hours and hours just grinding to get the perfect IVs, etc. So I think it's a fantastic change that will give the barriers to entry to building new teams and for people to try the VGC a lot smaller. Now, on the VP and starter pack side of things, I actually think Pokemon have done a pretty smart job here so far. My biggest concern when I saw victory points announced in the trailer that it would turn into a very pay-to-win game, but right now it does not feel like that way at all. The official Champions site describes Pokemon Champions as a free-to-start game with a starter pack bundle and optional paid items, plus paid membership features like more box spaces and usable battle items. That does not mean I love microtransactions, but a game has to make money somehow. For now, the amount of VP we've been giving feels very generous, and I really like how much you get from tutorials. I'm also a massive fan of how the game doesn't allow you to purchase VP. I'm sure this might change in the future, and I'm sure they're going to do like costume packs where you're also going to get like 10,000 VP as a bonus for buying it, for example, maybe. But for now, it really feels great, and I'm hoping they're going to be using training tickets as their kind of microtransaction currency. You can pay real money to train your Pokemon, and VP is just going to be got through earning things in game. As I feel you do get a really decent amount per game, and if you're not being stupid and spending all your money on retraining your Pokemon and doing stuff within the older games, I think it's a great currency, and at the moment it's not being too ungenerous and you're getting enough. Going further into the game, it might not be the case and we might not have a lack of currency and a lack of VP, but going forward we'll see. And hopefully, with new events that they're releasing, they keep to be generous with the VP and allow us to have microtransactions in other ways that don't actually affect the battles and are just things like cosmetic items, backgrounds for battling, etc. These things I can get behind being microtransactions and way to make more money, but when it's affecting the actual training and the Pokemon themselves, I don't think it's a great idea. But I do think the starter pack is a really great idea, and I think it's a really great value for money. As for somebody who has got into the game already, I haven't felt the need to buy the starter pack just yet, but I know as I get into it more and want to store more Pokemon in Champions, I think it seems like a really good value purchase. I also think it's really great how they've given out a free Dragonite, and with the upcoming competition tournaments that I wasn't able to participate in, that they're going to be giving a free Gardevoir as well. Two really great meta Pokemon, and I think it's really good that they're giving them out for free, and hopefully they're this generous in the future with more Pokemon in other events that they do going forward. So, overall, I'm really happy with this release. I have seen a lot of negativity about missing Pokemon, missing items, and performance issues. But at the moment, I think it's been a really fun launch. The limited meta makes team building exciting, the removal of IV breeding makes training so much easier, and the fact that you can bring Pokemon in from other games makes the whole thing feel so much more accessible. I'm really looking forward to trying the tournament format once that is getting going too, because I think that is where Pokemon Champions is going to get even more interesting. I think as long as they keep the game fair in terms of VP and pricing, and allow us to choose formats even when the new ones come in to be able to battle in older formats and practice with other teams if we'd like to, I genuinely think this could be a really great thing for Pokemon VGC and exactly what it needed. It gives Game Freak and the Pokemon Company room to experiment with new battle mechanics in Generation 10, while still letting people bring their favourite Pokemon into classic competitive play. For now, my advice is simple. Give it time, have some fun, and I'm pretty sure you enjoy it just as much as I have so far. I really appreciate you watching my views so far, and I really hope you enjoyed listening to my opinions on the first 24 hours or so of Pokémon Champion. What I'd really like to hear from you guys in the comments is, what is the team you're currently using, and what do you think about Pokémon Champion so far? I would also really appreciate it if you haven't reached this far into the video, if you could consider liking it and giving me a subscribe. I hope to maybe do some more Pokemon Champions content in the soon, so it would be really great to see who's interested. Thank you again very much for watching. It has been Freaksy, and I hope to see you all in the next video.